Good evening, everyone. Hello. Just got some joiners at the back we'll wait for. Hi, everyone. I am Brian Hills, the CEO of the Data Lab Innovation Centre. I can't tell you how great it is to see you all together here in Edinburgh for the first data science and technology meetup since all the craziness of the last 2 years. It's amazing to see everybody in person and be able to talk to you as well. And tonight, we're also live streaming to the world down that camera. And Product Forge are supporting us to do that. So thank you very much for the support from Product Forge. We obviously run these in combination with our friends at MBN Solutions as well. And Chris is going to run the Q&A after this session with Martin. So as it has been over 2 years, I thought I would just give you a really brief intro to what we've been doing in the Data Lab in the last 2 years, just for 5 minutes, for some things that we think would be of interest to you, potentially. And one of the key things that we've been looking at is creating the Data Lab community. And I've been at the Data Lab for 7 years now, so when we really started it up. And over that time, so many people have come to me and said, look, this stuff is great. We would really like to contribute into what you're doing and, you know, the purpose of what you're doing and how do we do that? And I don't have budget to hire everyone, but what we wanted to do is create the mechanism for people to help others move forward on their data journey. And the Data Lab community is all about enabling people to join and connect with each other and help each other move forward. Whether you're thinking about starting, whether you're on the student journey, whether you're a leader in that. And so we took this idea and ran it as an MVP with 20 people March 2021. Made every mistake there possibly could be, as you do with MVPs. And then last year, we launched it officially. So in that time, we've now, and there's a bunch of stats, as you'd expect from the Data Lab, but we've got over, this week, actually, we reached 1,500 members in the community. And surprisingly to us, from 43 countries around the world without even marketing it internationally. And that's a really interesting thing for us in terms of how we use that signal and convert it into something that's both positive for the data community in Scotland, but also allows us to influence and collaborate with what happens internationally as well. So you'll see all the stats up there. I wanted to ask you, I can't ask people online, obviously, or maybe you can comment in the comments, but whoever's for you who are in this room, how many have joined so far? So about 10. So there is great potential for everybody else who hasn't to join. You don't get to leave this room. You can sign off offline, that's okay, but you don't get to leave this room unless you do it. So perfect opportunity if you want to use a QR code. But essentially, we're building, for me, a digital fabric in how we scale what we do at the Data Lab. And our purpose is to change people's lives and to change the economy and the society of Scotland by transforming the way we use data. So we're really encouraging people to join us on that mission and provide this community as a way for everybody to be able to do that. So I'd expect some new sign-ups tomorrow, Paul. And Paul here has been running it all the way through and scaling it up for us. So the last couple of things, we're building it out, so we're going to put in a learning management system. So we're going to create some bespoke data science training courses there, but we're going to source that content from the community and ask them what you need. So we all know there's R and Python courses, etc., from well-defined places, but actually the questions when you get into work that you need help with, and Martin might touch about some of that later on, and various other elements we're going to build in there, as well as data maturity assessments and online meetups and all the rest of it. Anyway, that's community. The other thing that we are working on, and although we're in July, November is rapidly approaching, so we're working on our annual Festival of Data Innovation, which last year we did online, but we're returning to full in-person and online this year. And that runs for over 2 weeks, so 24th of October to the 4th of November. We run a fringe, so anybody can host an event for free as part of that, to debate data, to hack data, to do things with school children, whatever it is. And then Data Summit here is a culmination of those 2 weeks on the 3rd and the 4th of November. And we're going to be doing that in the EICC. So it's a much bigger place than we've tried in the past. So it'll be a really interesting experiment for us in running that. And if you join the community, I'm not going to say that again, but if you join the community, there's 45% discount on the full price of a ticket. So join the community for free and get access to that. And just to finish up, some of the speakers that we have got confirmed so far for Data Summit, people like Giovanni Giardio, who's working in the ESA on all the great stuff that you're seeing coming out of the Space Agency and the new telescope, through to Stephanie Hare, who's written a great new book on data ethics and technology, and Susie Dent from Countdown is going to be coming as well. So we're really excited for that. So lots of stuff happening, but let's flip to now. That's in the future, and hopefully you can participate. But for this evening, absolutely delighted to welcome Martin Thorne, who is the head of data science for Aberdeen, and going to talk about putting ML from proof of concept into production. And when many moons ago, when I was doing stuff technically, and I don't do that anymore, but data for me was like a cottage industry. So you'd have a project, you'd be creating insight, and you'd deliver it, but it was never a thing that you could easily put into production. So I'm really looking forward to Martin's talk this evening, who will explain his approach to doing that at Aberdeen, and I'm sure lots of lessons for us to learn along the way. So please give a warm welcome to Martin. And Chris will follow up with a Q&A at the end. Martin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Got to be honest, I agreed with Michael from MBN I'd do this, and that was fine. It's all in the future. And then it gets closer, and we're sold out. That's a bit daunting. I'm going to put it online afterwards. Oh, okay. I'm going to live stream it. Oh, wow. Right. Okay. I really can't swear now. I think actually my children might be watching, which is really quite daunting as well. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time. You all have other places you could be, so really, really grateful that you've come out. Hopefully I can repay that with something that's quite interesting. So yeah, I'm going to talk about moving from proof of concept into production, because that's where I think the biggest challenge we've got as a data science community is. We've got lots of super smart people, but when you actually look at companies, how many companies are really putting that super smart feeling and theory into practice? I think that's a smaller number. I should also say hello to the internet as well, to people that have joined us there. So I don't know about you, but whenever I go to a conference or I see somebody online, there's always two questions I have in the back of my head that may be a bit harsh, but I always think, well, who are you? And two, why should I listen to what you've got to say, right? So maybe some of you feeling the same thing, so I'll address that just now. So my name's Martin Thorne. I'm head of data science and data platform for Aberdeen. Aberdeen might not be a company you've immediately heard of, but you'll have heard of Standard Life and maybe Aberdeen Asset Management. So a big asset manager based in Edinburgh. Prior to that, I was at Clydesdale Bank for 2 years, Sky for 10 years, Scottish Power, etc. The first thing to get out, in case anyone's Googled it, I'm not a data scientist. I am head of data science, but I'm not a data scientist. I've actually got an arts degree, believe it or not. So my career is I'm an analyst by trade. I've spent the last, embarrassingly enough, 25 years as a data career making sense of data for really important people in a company. Whether that's as an analyst, I was in technology for a long time, so in Sky, I ran their entire BI platform, so that was business objects back at the time, looking after all their data warehousing. I've looked after their contact center telephony. I looked after various different things. It's been a disparate career if you look at my LinkedIn, but the common thread's always been, I make sense of data for really important C-suite type people. And about 4 years ago, I started specialising in data science, and I picked up a data science role in Clydesdale Bank, which is now Virgin Money UK. And I built a data science team out for them, worked with them for 2 years, and then I've done exactly the same at Aberdeen for the last 2 years. And I'm actually just about to change role again. And if anyone's been through the kind of interview thing lately, you have to think about what have I done and what am I good at and what am I not good at. That's really prompted me to think, well, what have I learned in the last 4 years? And what I'm actually going to be leaving the data science space and getting back into the kind of data warehousing kind of space. And so it's really prompted me to think about what have I learned in the last 10 years? Is there dare I say it, is there a gift? Is there something I can pass on that say, here's what I've learned over the last 4 years, which may or may not be useful. So I've got 10 top tips We've got time for questions at the end, so I'm happy to hear disagreements and boos at the end. We'll go through it, but really want it to be kind of interactive at the end. So anything you don't agree with, please tell me. I just want a debate about it. But this is very much my view, coming at it from a kind of corporate and commercial space. So without further ado, tip number one. My tip number one is play the long game. One of my favorite quotes, but to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To a recently qualified data scientist, everything looks like an opportunity to show your machine learning prowess, to go and do something that's really cool. And my approach to this is always, I want to walk first. Let's walk, let's crawl, let's run. You might be really lucky and you might be working in a company that is ready for deep neural networks. But a lot of you will have experienced, you come out of university, you go into the corporate environment, oh, they're not nearly as data literate as I thought we were. And I know, speaking about some of the clients that Data Lab work with, it's a common experience where you think you're ready for this, actually no, we've got some work to do, we've got some fundamentals to do. So what I advocate is start with the analytics, build trust, and then weave in the appropriate machine learning. Now, if you've just popped out of university after doing a PhD, MSc, and an undergrad, you want to do really cool machine learning, and I get that. What I'm trying to advocate is you can build it, but it might not get into production. I really advocate, if you start with analytics, if you start with the base, you build trust, people buy into what you're doing, and it makes the next stage much, much easier. So I always kind of answer the question, well, what data have you got? Let's look at what data you've got, and let's work out what does it tell you. And you'd be surprised how often people have data that they don't know what it's telling them. You'd be surprised how often you can answer questions. They don't need machine learning. They need frequency counts in SQL. That'll blow them away. So it's what does it tell you? And then once you've gained that respect and that trust, you can then start to have a conversation that says, right, okay, well, what could it tell you? Where could we go with this? What could we do? And in Aberdeen, we started speaking to a department 18 months ago, and they came to me and said, we want to do machine learning. And I was like, brilliant. It's a brilliant use case. Really, really nice department. Said, this is going to be amazing. And we sat down with them and we said, oh, you're not ready for machine learning. You're not at that stage in the journey yet. The data was really disparate. They didn't have a handle on it. Everything was threshold based. So the first thing we did was we built them a database. We then put Power BI over the top of it. We did what we thought they would want rather than what they directly asked for. We built them a straw man in terms of a Power BI dashboard that said, this is what we think you'd find interesting. We evolved it, we iterated it, and then to be honest, we didn't speak to them much for the next 18 months. Now, I'm quite a passionate, driven individual. 18 months for me is an eternity. So I would love it to be much faster than that. But what they did was after 18 months, they came back to us. We'd loaded the data a couple of times for them. We'd made some tweaks to the dashboard. But that was them learning at their pace. That was the pace they were comfortable at. This was a revolution for them. So all of their systems were threshold based. And what we allowed them to do was, what happens if you move those thresholds about? What if you can start to play with that data? What does it tell you differently? And they came back to us after 18 months and said, we love this. This has changed our world. You were talking about machine learning before. What could you do for us? What more could you do? And we've now started to weave in a bit more intelligence into their dashboards. I would love to have done this a year ago, but we're doing it at their pace and they're really comfortable with that. And that's what I advocate. If you play the long game and you walk in with that, you maybe miss out on the sexy stuff straight away, but it comes eventually. It builds that credibility. It builds that trust. So that's tip number one. If you find that offensive, by the way, it gets way worse, right? So sorry if you've just come out of your PhD, but this is just my views on how to get this into production. So second one, dumb in production. I advocate that dumb in production wins every day over clever and on the shelf. And the reason is quite simple. Your clever ideas don't pay the mortgage. Your clever ideas will not make the company money. Your clever ideas will not move the company forward. Great if you want to get published. Great if it's an intellectually stimulating thing to do. But in terms of lifestyle, in terms of moving that forward, it's not where you want to be. For me, it's all about dumbing it down, making it simple, and getting it into production. And for me, perfection is the enemy of progress. You know, what's good enough? What do you need to do? I see far too many examples of people spending time and energy taking a model from 85% effective to 90% effective, when what people are doing at the moment is the equivalent of throwing a dart at the wall and going, we'll do that. You know, so you need to look at what's good enough. What are you replacing? What are you talking to people about? What is good enough for them to take it and run with it. It's really intellectually satisfying to move at that next stage, but the conversation I always have with my team is, if we've got a model here and you want to spend 2 months perfecting it, I could either spend 2 months perfecting it, or I could go and do something brand new with a new data set for 2 months. What's going to give me the most value as the team owner? Well, it's probably going to be new data set, because that's maybe new people to impress, new things to go out with, new insight, new nuggets to find. That's probably more valuable to me in terms of representing back up to my line to say, what have you done today, Thorne? That's more interesting to me. And also, it's really, really easy to write a business case once you've got something in production. So if you deliver something, even if it's a bit shonky and you're not terribly proud of it, if it's in production and it's working, dead easy to then say to somebody, we've deployed this and we can see the value that it's creating in the business right now. It's not theoretical, it's actually delivering value just now. If you give me some more money, I can make it better, which will deliver you more value. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for that credibility. And it's all about what could you do versus what have you done, right? So there's lots of things that people in this room could have done, could do, great ideas. I'm more interested in what you've actually done. And that can seem quite, especially with such an academic discipline, that sounds like I'm being quite rude. And I don't mean to be rude. And to take it out of the context, who should do my loft conversion? So a wee bit of admin. I have 2 children. We live in a Victorian terrace in the south side of Glasgow. We can't go out, we can't go inside because other people live there. We can only go up. So we've got 2 children that are growing and we're wanting to build a loft conversion. Which architect should I use? Do I use the architect that's just out of university and has got great ideas and they're really outlandish? Or do I use the architect that's done 1 million loft conversions before? It's an eye-watering sum of money that they're asking for, and it's the same for the builder. I'm not going to use a builder that's got great ideas but has never done it. I've watched enough grand designs over the years to know how that ends, right? So I'm going to pick the proven, established, you can do it. That's what I'm going to buy. If it's my money, that's what I'm going to do. In business, it's the same. It's exactly the same. So I can look at a CV and I can go, God, your CV is incredible. I might actually hire the person whose CV isn't quite as incredible, but they've actually delivered stuff. They've been there, they've seen it, they've done it, they've got the t-shirt. That's what I'm looking for as an employer, is someone who can actually deliver. If you're the smartest person in the room, great, but if you don't have that kind of credibility in terms of being able to deliver stuff, it's all about what's good enough. And I'll give you an example. When I was at Clydesdale, and I'm very aware Anselma's in the room who works for me at Clydesdale, so hopefully I'll remember this right. You can heckle me if I don't. But when we were at Clydesdale, there was a business account managers, essentially. So they looked after 1,000 business customers each. Now, 1,000 customers is an impossibly large number for someone to look after. So on a daily, weekly basis, these guys and girls would basically go, who should I phone today? I'll phone that person. And what am I going to talk to them about? Well, I'm just going to talk to them about stuff. We built them a little app that basically said, of all the people to talk to this week, talk to these people and talk to them about these products. Because we looked at life cycle and we worked out, generally when you've been with us this amount of time, when the company's been open this amount of time, you want insurance, and then you want this product, then you want this product, this product. And we deployed it out to the market. The model wasn't the most efficient model. It's not going to be on any of my data scientist CVs. I'm pretty comfortable. Anselma, we can check your CV later. But I don't think anyone's going to go, that's the best bit of work I've ever done. But when we delivered it out to the account managers, they were like, this is fantastic. And I got a phone call from one of the guys who said, Martin, I was just speaking to one of my customers. You told me that they'd be ready for asset finance. I phoned them and they just bought it from one of our competitors. And my heart sank. I was like, oh God, he's going to kick off. And he's like, so that shows it's working. We just need to work on the timing. If I'd called them 2 weeks ago, I would have got the sale. And it's what's good enough. To us, the model wasn't amazing, but it's better than essentially what they were doing was throwing a dart at the wall and going, I'll phone that company today. It was better than what they had, and it was in production, and it was working. So, tip number 2, dumb in production wins every time. I might get rotten fruit thrown at me next time. Tip number 3, algorithms aren't important. Or in particular, they aren't as important as you think they are. Why do I say that? It's even worse. I don't think people care what algorithm you actually used. You guys really care, like really care, and I love that. The end users don't. The end users care about the output. They don't need to see you're working. This isn't school. right? And this is where I think sometimes academia does a disservice, because in academia, you're trying to find a new and imaginative way to solve an existing problem. In big company corporate land, you're trying to solve a problem the fastest, quickest, most reliable way possible. But ultimately, if you're a data scientist or data engineer or whatever the job title is, you've been hired as a professional. You're a professional, and we trust your judgment, or at least we should trust your judgment. It's up to you. You pick the right algorithm, I'll trust you, you know? One of my guys was talking, I think it's at Hugging Face, they were talking really enthusiastically about, we just use Hugging Face. And I was like, what on earth is Hugging Face? And they were talking all about it. Great that it works. I just care about the output. I'm not that bothered about what you use, because I'm trusting you to be a professional. In the same way I'm trusting my architect, I don't say to my architect, are you sure there's enough room around the bed? Are you sure we've got enough light coming in? Are you sure structurally it's not going to collapse my house? Because he's an architect. He's done all that work. He's got the packages. He's got the tooling. He's got the experience that I trust him. I've hired him. I'm going to listen to what he's got to say. And for me, if you can show great outcomes, no one really cares how you got there. You might find super technical stakeholders. So I work in an asset management world where a lot of my clients are PhDs and super, super clever. They do sometimes care about that level of technical understanding. But it's not what you lead with. It's not the first thing out your mouth. And I'm going to prove why algorithms aren't as important as outcomes. And this, you're going to, unequivocally, you're all going to walk away and go, God, he actually has proved it. I've just bought an iron, right? And I know it looks like I've never used an iron in my life, but I have bought an iron and I did use it this morning, and it's fantastic. My old iron broke, got a new iron. It's absolutely brilliant. I can judge whether it's a good iron or not. Does it iron my clothes? Does it spit water all over it? It's a cordless iron, which is witchcraft. I have no idea how this iron works. I didn't study irons at university. I don't have an electrical engineering degree. I have no idea how this thing works. It works. I pick it up, it irons my clothes, I put it down. It's fantastic. I can tell you it's a good iron because I'm looking at the outcomes of it. Everybody knows that. Everyone knows, is this a good car? Is it a bad car? Are these trainers good trainers? Are they bad trainers? Are they good headphones? Are they bad headphones? You don't need to be an expert in the technology to be able to assess whether the technology works for you. It's exactly the same for us here. We are talking about delivering an outcome, and our business users can tell you whether that outcome works or whether it doesn't. We may well get into a debate as to whether Hugging Face is better than some other thing that I'm not close enough to the detail to understand. We can get into that debate at a later date. That's not the important thing. Which leads me on to, outcomes are the ones that are important. It's not how you got there, it's where you got to. And I'm going to give you two examples. If you're sitting in front of a room full of people and you're trying to sell your latest thing, if you're saying, let me tell you about this algorithm, or you could say, this is going to save us 200 grand a year. What's going to grab the attention of the really important people? It's the latter one, every single day of the week. And I always say to my guys, you've got 30 seconds to sell your idea to somebody. What are you going to lead with? Well, you're not going to lead with, well, this is a random forest. What's a random forest? Well, let me explain to you how. That's 30 seconds gone, right? You need to lead with, what outcome is this going to give me? What is this going to do? How is this going to help me? And people buy ideas, they buy concepts, they buy lifestyles. I hate Apple. Hate's a strong word, but I really don't like Apple as a company. But Apple are fantastic at getting people to buy the latest products, and they don't talk about the technology. I've just walked past the Apple shop to get here, and it's the new chipset, supercharge your iMac, supercharge your iPad. And people just go, supercharge, that's good, that's better than non-supercharged. Cool, let's buy that. They don't talk about the silicon on the chip. They don't talk about, even if a new iPhone comes out, the camera's better. Very rarely do Apple say how much better or why it's better or what. They talk about the outcome. They talk about why you need it, why you want it. You guys, the experts, care about the technology, deeply, passionately care about the technology. And I wouldn't have it any other way. That's your job. That's what you do. But everyone else cares about outcomes. They really, really care about outcomes. And when I was hiring for data scientists in my Aberdeen role, we did a load of interviews, and then for the second stage of the interviews, we gave people data away, and we asked them, and the exact question was, come up with exciting insight. Tell us what you can tell us about this data. What did you find interesting? And they played it back, and I asked the same question. You've had this data, you've had a few days, weeks to play with it. What did you tell me? What can you tell me? Almost every single person started their presentation with, the algorithm I used was. And even at the end of it, I came back to him and said, you've got 30 seconds to explain to the CEO why this is important and why he or she should fund it. Well, the algorithm I used was, I don't care. It's what's the outcome? What is it telling me? What does it do? Is it interesting data? Is there anything there? Did you find any nuggets? That's the bit I care about. We can get on to the how you got there later, but that's the bit I care about. Have I flogged that horse enough? I think probably I have. So tip number 5, again, you've just done your PhD. It's hard, but you need to be part salesperson. Change is really, really hard in companies, especially companies that have been going a long time and been doing things the same way for a long time. Explaining machine learning to people is really hard, right? It's a difficult concept, especially once you get into the more complicated models where it's like, why is it recommending that result over that result? It just is. It takes these factors, it does stuff, and then it kicks it out. That's a difficult thing to get people to buy into. So getting people to trust the IT is hard, but getting people to trust you is harder. Right? So in the environment I work in, asset management, it's not unusual for me to find somebody who's been working in asset management for 30 years. They know this area absolutely inside out. And I rock up with 2 years experience with somebody who got their PhD 6 months ago, and I go, I can do your job better than you can. And they go, really? How can you? You have to build that trust. And the salesperson, for me, it's all about simplifying your language. So the Apple example again, they're not talking about technical, they're simplifying the language. I was fortunate enough to work for Sky for 10 years, and I met the CEO of Sky quite a few times, a guy called Jeremy Darroch. Now, he's earning 7-8 million a year. So this guy's unequivocally one of the most important people I've ever met, or certainly one of the most well-paid people I've ever met. And when you ask, when people say, what do you explain? What do you do for a living? Why have you been at Sky for such a long time? Why are you so good? And he said, I just introduce clever people to other clever people, and they just do really good stuff, and I help them do really good stuff. And that was a level he talked about. We've all met people, dinner parties, I have 2 small children, I don't go to dinner parties anymore, but you've all met people who've overstated what they do. Oh, I'm managing director of this, I do this. And it puts people off. Whereas if someone says to me, what do I do for a living? I drink tea and talk to people. That's my job. I just chat to people, and I help to connect and help to get insight out of data. The more you can kind of play things down and dumb things down, the more people want to work with you. The more people go, you're not threatening, that's quite nice. I quite like working with you on that. And my acid test, and I hope she's not watching, is my poor mum. Can you explain it to my 72-year-old mother? My mum is an ex-college lecturer, so she's a very, very clever woman. She'll tell you she doesn't like technology. She does. She uses technology every day. She's got an iPhone, she's got an iPad, we've just got Google Play, we just got Apple, whatever CarPlay is called in our car. She uses the technology, but the technology gets a window to prove its usefulness. And if it doesn't prove its usefulness, it's away. So against my better judgment, we're just back from 2 weeks in Portugal with my mum and dad, my family, my sister's family. And on the first night, we were sitting there, and my brother-in-law and my dad take out like 300 euros worth of cash. And they said, Martin, have you got money for the kitty? I said, what kitty? What's going on here? And my sister and my mum and dad go on holiday quite a lot. And well, what we do is we get money from the kitty, and then we run this little book, and we note down what everyone's spent. And I'm like, why are we using cash? Cash is used by drug dealers and women of the night. But nobody uses cash anymore. I want to do contactless. And I'm not taking money out. We're not running a book on an Excel spreadsheet or something. Why don't we just use Splitwise, the app? What's Splitwise? And I explained it was just a little app, and every time anybody has expense, you just 2 or 3 buttons, click, and then what happens is it'll automatically work out who's owed what at the end of the day. You don't have to change. If you want to use cash, you use cash. If you want to use electronic, you use electronic. Doesn't matter. But the key here is it means you spend less time totting stuff up and more time drinking wine on holiday. Sounds good, doesn't it? And Mum was like, it sounds quite difficult though. No, I'll show you. Click, 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 click. That's amazing. Now she won't shut up about it. She thinks it's the best app ever, and she keeps telling everybody, this is really good. And it's all about being part salesman and going, what bit of your life isn't really adding much value, and kind of whisper it, but I come from a family of accountants who actually really like leveling the books and doing that by hand. So it's taken away a little bit the stuff they really like doing, but it's saying, This just means you get more time on holiday, and it just does it for you. And if you can be that kind of salesperson, if you can tap into how are you going to make this, bring this to life for somebody, that's when people will start to trust you. Which moves you on to tip number 6, be non-threatening. So I've already said, I've got a 7-year-old and a very soon-to-be 3-year-old who may or may not be watching depending on bedtime. I love my kids more than anything in the world. Well, I also love going out with my wife and pretending we don't have kids now and again so that we don't have to answer all the why questions, that we can finish a sentence with each other. So I would look very kindly upon anyone who would take my children for an evening and say, just allow us to go out. But I wouldn't let a cannibal look after my kids because, well, that's crazy. I'm not going to trust them to do that because, well, they enjoy eating people. That's ridiculous. Clearly a ridiculous example. Would you help someone who could cost you your job? Now, we're really lucky. I'm guessing we all work in technology, right? So technology people, especially highly skilled technology people, it's MBN guys will tell you it's a buoyant market. You can go and speak to Chris if you want a new job. You know, there's lots going on. It's a really lucrative market. We're really fortunate that we're unlikely to get made redundant anytime soon. Certainly not in the individual levels. If you're a middle manager and you've worked in the same company for decades and you do a fairly manual job, and one of us rocks up and goes, hi, can you tell me what you do for a living? Because I want to automate it. They're just, no, I'm not going to help you. Why would I help you? And everybody knows if you give computers an inch, they take a mile, right? Google's sentient these days. You know, we've got all these different problems, self-driving cars and, you know, all these different issues that people read in the Daily Mail or whatever. People are scared. They're nervous of the technology. And we're coming along saying technology is going to make your life better, and they're suspicious, right? So I advocate starting out with something that helps them. Find something in their job that they don't enjoy, or something that takes up too much time, or something that's just an add-on, and say, can I help you make that a bit better? And generally you'll get a good response to that. It's like, what in your job do you just hate? The mundane bits, the bit that takes that horrible bit of work that you don't enjoy. How can I take that away? And if you can make them look like a rock star, so to my Clydesdale example before, making a salesperson look like a rock star by making their job easier, that's when they trust you. That's when they go, oh, that's quite good. What more could we do? You've already increased my bonus. You've got the best sales result I've ever had this year. What more can we do? How can we work together? I like that. Help me. And once you've done that, you can talk to them about the next stage. You can explain to them, right, well, you know how you enjoyed doing this? Well, I can help this and I can help that. And before you know it, you've got an advocate. You've got someone who wants to work with you. Which leads me on to tip number 7, which is befriend the incumbent. So almost inevitably, if you're building something, you're replacing something, right? It might be that somebody's built this god-awful Excel sheet that's been there for 15 years and it's full of VBA or whatever. It might be an Access database. It might be something really smart. It might be somebody going to a different office once a week to go and speak to somebody. You're doing something that's going to replace something that someone else is doing. That's someone's baby. And they really, really care about it. They really, really like it. It's what they do. It's what they've been doing for decades. And you rocking up and telling them their baby's ugly, that's not a good look, right? That's a particularly difficult sell. So how do you get around it? They've got something they really love. You think it's awful and you want to replace it. You could hit them with a stick and you could beat your way out of it. So you could speak to their boss and their boss's boss and their boss's boss and go, this stuff's just mental. We can replace it. We can do it smarter, faster, better, cheaper. That might work. Sticks might work. But carrots might work as well. And I will stand in front of you and admit, I have tried many, many, many times to bypass the incumbent. I'm a pretty bullshit individual, so I'm more than happy to bypass people to try and get there. I don't think it's ever worked, ever. And another Clydesdale example, Anselma, so to keep the thoughts to yourself, but when we were at Clydesdale, we built a tool that was 20 times more effective than the incumbent. 20 times more effective. COO, oh, that's fantastic, let's go and do that. One level down, well, that's fantastic, let's do that. Another level down, that's fantastic, let's do that. The guy that runs it, I don't think that's going to work. Why not? Oh, look, an eagle. You know, and we then have ongoing conversations, and he said, well, I've spoken to the vendor has seen this before. It won't work. Okay, well, let's speak to the vendor. Why won't it? Well, it just won't work. And the vendor's got a point release coming, and that's going to make the system better. It's not going to make it 20 times better, though, is it? Oh, that they say it's really good. And the point release comes, and it improves by 1%. And then you go, oh, there's a major release coming. That's going to make it much better. We're replatforming it. That's going to change it. And that comes, and it's another incremental improvement. That went on for 9 months. And it never went into production, as far as I'm aware. And it was 20 times more effective. And the reason it didn't get into production was because ultimately the manager of that team is faced with a choice. Do I back the person that I've probably known for decades that's been running this tool? Do I back them? Or do I back this group of PhDs over here that I don't know that much about, who are telling me it's better? The guy I really trust is telling me it's not going to work. It's quite a difficult human behavior as such. That's a big ballsy move to say, well, we could just increment what we've got, or we could rip it up, really upset Billy. And I like Billy. Billy's a good guy. I don't really want to upset him. And that's what we're talking about here. You're not going to bypass them. You're not going to be able to bully them out of the way. You need to befriend them. You need to help them. You need to try and get away, trying to work with them. That's the hard thing. Slight change attack. Tip number 8. And there's only 10 tips. So we're nearly there. Thank you for your patience. You don't need more data. I can assure you, you don't need more data. Because the real trick is to get value out of the data you've already got. Right? We've already got far too much data, way too much data. Thanks to Hadoop and big data, you don't need to throw anything away anymore. So you've got log files for 2 years, where you used to throw them away after 2 months, 3 months. Is anyone mining it? Is anyone doing it? The answer is probably not. No, they're not. But what if you could mine it? What if you could dig into that? To me, more expensive data is just an expensive way to procrastinate, right? All it's saying is, I can't do anything just now, but if I buy data, it's gonna revolutionize what we're doing. And asset management's a really bad one for that. They love buying more data. And it's like, yeah, but ultimately, we've got so much of it. We're swimming in it. Why can't we go and use what we've got and do something with it? That's the compelling thing. And as a data science community, we excel when we turn junk into insight. Data that people would throw away. I love whenever somebody says, oh, we've got a Splunk database and we've got all log files in it. I'm like, yes, now we're talking. I can get into that because I'll get nuggets out of that. I know I'll find nuggets out of that much cheaper and faster than Splunk will. Much faster than Splunk will. So let me at it. Let me get to that data and we'll do something really cool with it. Think of it as IT upcycling. You know, so it's like that chest of drawers that no one cares about that someone paints and then sells to a hipster. That works, right? That's what we're talking about, but in IT terms. We're talking about finding that nonsense data and upselling it, making it look just so much better. And in this cost-conscious times that most of us are living in, that's the sweet spot. Doing something on data that's worth nothing is incredible. Again, Clydesdale example, because it's easier talking about a company I used to work with than a company I currently work with, because that might get me into trouble. We did some stuff with the security guys where we basically took a dump of all the swipe card data. So-and-so swiped in this door. And we took a dump of the printer logs, and we took a dump of the internet activity, and then internet activity, and mail flow, and a few other things. We mashed it all together, and then we did some anomaly detection on it. Who looks odd? Which people are behaving in an odd way? And it was incredible. We called them persons of interest, which I think is such a cute term. So it was then like, let's look at these persons of interest. That person's coming in and out of the office an awful lot, or that person's printing an awful lot. And the idea was we wanted to build up a profile that said, a business analyst generally behaves like this. What's this business analyst doing? That's unusual. What are they up to? And that's where you go. That's data that they would have thrown away. That was data nobody was using. They had things like Darktrace that was looking at web traffic. But in the year 2020, if somebody gets sacked for surfing on their work computer for something they shouldn't be surfing for, I'm sorry. That's people don't do that anymore, I hope. But what you do find is that people, and what we found in Clydesdale was, people were never the top of the list, but they were maybe halfway down. And they were halfway down, and they were being just a wee bit sleek it on a number of different levels. And you can start to pull that data out. But it's that junk data that allows you to look like a rock star. You know, so that IT security team were previously they were looking for somebody to whistleblow and say, oh, I think there's something up with so-and-so, and they would go and investigate this. And this gave them another avenue that allowed them to almost do their own whistleblowing and say, the systems say these people are behaving weirdly. And as a great acid test, they didn't tell us initially, but the people that we identified as behaving weirdly were the IT security analysts. Because of course they're behaving weirdly, because they're going and investigating people and doing things at different times of day and night. But that just proved that the system was working. So tip number 8, you don't need more data. Tip number 9, standalone POCs. This is one I'm really, really passionate about. I was going to put this one first because I think it's one of the most important, but it didn't really work with the flow. To me, having done this data for a long time, and ETL and data transformation, that's the really expensive bit, right? Moving data about is expensive and it's difficult, and you need architects and you need to punch hole in firewalls, and you need security involved, and it's a nightmare. Don't do it. Don't even consider it for your POC. Assume that everything is possible in technology, because guess what? Generally is. Right? Unless you're talking about something that needs to be near real time, you can make your way about loads of different systems. You can make it work. Even if it's day plus 2, you can make stuff work. So I always assume that whatever we're building, there will be a way to productionize it. But before you start, you need to see if you've got nuggets there. If you start working out the plumbing before you've even worked out if there's an opportunity, you're wasting money, right? So I advocate just dumps of data, CSVs, text files, anything. Can you give me a month's worth of extract from that system? That's easy to get. Dump it into Azure or AWS, whatever and then do your analysis on it. And if you find the nuggets, that's when you can then get enthusiasm. Because it's easy to get enthusiasm for a proof of concept that costs 10 grand. Really hard to get enthusiasm for a proof of concept that costs £500,000. So if you're trying to say to somebody, the frustrating thing about what we all do for a living is you don't know, there's no certainty of output. I'm going to go and investigate this data and it might have something cool in it. Well, that's difficult. If I'm going to spend £500,000, I want certainty that you're going to find something great. I can't give you that certainty because we've not looked at it yet. At £500,000, that's a problem. At 10 grand, to a lot of companies, people are paying consultants £1,000 a day. So if you're charging somebody 10 grand for a month's worth of work, that's pretty reasonable. You need to turn the IT model on its head. If you speak to somebody, what do you hate about IT? It's too slow, costs too much money, you all speak a stupid language, I don't understand. People don't like dealing with IT. So turn it on its head, make it easy. If you can then have the conversation that says, look what I achieved for almost nothing. Imagine what I could achieve if you gave me proper cash. And back to my kind of idea about getting stuff into production. If you get it into production, it's easy to then go, that's brilliant. If I give you more money, I'm just going to get more of that. You create certainty of output by doing that. And again, at Clydesdale, we just used to charge people's cost codes. So we would just say to an individual department, we will charge you 10, 20 grand a month. And every month we'll meet you and you can tell us, is that actually useful to you? Are you getting value? If you're not getting value, we'll just shut it down, we'll do something else. But if you're getting value, we'll just keep doing it. And we'll keep doing it until you get more value. So, final one. Tip number 10, you need to kiss a lot of frogs. The best products in a technology point of view aren't always the ones that win, right? So I'm old enough to do the whole Betamax versus VCR, right? But there's people that weren't born when I graduated uni in this room, so that's not going to mean anything, right? But the iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. I had a Sony Ericsson smartphone running Symbian at the time, and I thought it was brilliant. It's dead. I had a Pebble smartwatch. It's dead too. I've got a smart ring, that'll probably be dead in 6 months, right? But I frequently back the wrong technology because I back the technology that I think's great. It's not always the one that gets the public imagination. And it's going to be exactly the same with your data science projects. The bit of code you think's cooler than anything else in the world might not be the one that that captures the public imagination. The one that captures the imagination might be the bit of code you robbed off the internet and spent 5 minutes changing. That might be the one that people go, God, that's fantastic. I love that. That's what you need to do. You need to be prepared to play it as a numbers game. You need to create, evaluate, shut down, and move on. You need to be ruthless, absolutely ruthless with your proof of concepts and your experiments. And like I said at the start, when my guys are working on something, I always say, if you're going to spend 2 months perfecting that, or we could do something brand new for 2 months, I want to do the brand new thing. Because there's more chance of that getting picked up. There's more chance of that appealing to somebody. And it's that brand new idea versus incremental progress. 75% model effectiveness, if that's good enough, go with that. Don't spend the next 6 months trying to get it to 95%. And don't lose the faith, because you only need one win. I've got a couple of friends who are looking for a job at the moment, and it's really disheartening looking for a job. But I keep saying, it only takes one phone call, and then your life changes. It's exactly the same with data science. It only takes one of your proof of concepts to get into production, and then suddenly it opens the door to everything else being reevaluated. Oh, I can see that's working. It's making us money. It's helping us. It's making us more efficient. What else have you got in that cupboard of tricks? Go and show me. And then you can take everything out. Well, we did this one 6 months ago. We did that one 9 months ago. You'd be surprised how often it just needs one conversation. You brush the dust off something you did a year ago, and a new person in the team, somebody suddenly picks it up and goes, that's it. But you need to kiss a lot of frogs. You need to keep pushing that and keep being ruthless. So, to recap, play the long game. Crawl, walk, run. Dumb in production beats clever and on the shelf every single day of the week. Algorithms aren't important. Outcomes are important. You need to be a bit of a salesman. You need to make it non-threatening. You can't bypass the incumbent because they win every time, so just don't even try. Don't buy more data. Use the data you've got. Please do a standalone POC and just focus on making it as cheap and as quick to implement as possible. And you need to kiss a lot of frogs. So that's me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Martin-Thorne, or you can tweet me if you want, Martin G. Thorne, but I don't really use Twitter, but some people ask for that. I've got time to answer questions just now. Chris is here to do Q&A. I don't know if anyone's brave enough to go for the first question, or Chris is going to go for a pre-canned one, but we've got roving mics, so hand in the air if you've got any questions. Or maybe you just want me to stop talking. A question? Hold on, we're just getting mics for the live stream, so hold on 2 seconds.
Thank you very much. So you talked a lot about essentially having data scientists who have a good product focus rather than focusing just on the tech. Have you got any good tips to foster that kind of behavior at work, or just get them to actually gain more domain knowledge into the work they're doing?
That's a really good question. I don't think there's a shortcut to it other than just spending time in the business and actually spending time with your stakeholders and working out what makes them tick. What I find quite a lot is when you sit down with somebody and watch what they do for a living, you see them doing something, you're like, why are you doing it that way? I can help you with that. And I think that's the only way to break in, is just to kind of drop the pretense and go, right, I'm not going to deliver a machine learning algorithm this afternoon. I'm going to speak to somebody. I'm going to learn more about the business. That's the only way you can do it, is just understand where their pain points are and try and see if you can think of a way to help them. And just listen to the way they talk and listen to the things that help them. And the other kind of fairly obvious thing is, you don't get the behavior you expect to get the behavior you incentivize. So often for the people in the business, what are they incentivized to do? They're incentivized to make this product better, to make this more efficient. If you can tap into that and say, I can help you, if it helps their bottom line, that's it. But it's a hard one because all the way through university, they don't prioritize soft skills. Right? And I'm not having to go at universities. I would do exactly the same. They prioritize deep technical knowledge over everything else. There are not that many companies in Scotland that are ready for deep neural networks. But there are a hell of a lot of companies that would love you to come up and build a database for them because they're currently running it in Lotus Notes or Access or something like that. I mean, you're laughing. There are still Lotus Notes, Domino's databases out there. There's loads of them. And there's people who are making a living and making them a little bit better. So for me, it's all about just getting closer to the business and just understanding what makes them tick. I don't know if that answers your question. Hopefully it does. It's not an easy one, though. And if I'm hiring, I will usually hire for the softer skills before I'll hire for the technical skills. Because like I say, in my company just now, the most technical person in the room will just be wasted on me. I would much rather have somebody who isn't quite as good technically, but has got that ability to communicate with people a bit better. They're not mutually exclusive. You see people like Cassie Kozikov from Google, if you follow her. She's incredible at both. She's a unicorn, and Ali K. Miller from AWS are both brilliant technically, but also with the good communicators. But it's pretty rare. So, but that's what I would focus on. Business skills, what hurts, what do they need help on? Anyone else?
Hi, Thank you very much for that talk. It was really brilliant, comprehensive as well. So you did say that data science product will go into production, but there needs to be commitment from end users. But in regards to high management, most businesses, for example, software teams, their sources are not prioritized over other business, like critical business data sources. So what kind of recommendation do you give for people working with stakeholders that are difficult, that don't want to tap into software teams and the proof of concepts that they use?
To play that back, if I can, so I think if I'm speaking, what you're saying, you've got a business that don't really want to use what you're building and want to prioritize their money on something else?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a kind of extension of the similar point, which is you need to make them care. It sounds a horribly glib answer, right? But you need to work out what is it that's driving them? What are they getting hit over the head for every single day of the week? They're getting hit in the head because they're missing their sales targets. How can I help you hit your sales targets? You're getting hit over the head because there's a hiring freeze. They used to have 10 analysts, they've now got 6. Well, how can if I can build something that does the job of 4 analysts, well, let's go and do that. It's about appealing to them in a way that they can't say no. I'm going to be honest with you, it's really hard. It's really hard. And over the last 4 years, I've banged my head against a lot of brick walls and we've built this proof of concept. It's this is the one that's going to get into production. Boom, nothing happens. It's really hard at the moment. And it all comes back down to the same thing. Getting someone to trust it, getting the incumbent to buy into it. You need to take people on the journey. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is if you sit in a little data science cluster over here, and then a year later go, ta-da, we've built something that's going to change your company. Everyone goes, who are you? You don't know anything about what we're doing. Whereas if you're sitting beside them, I'm a big fan of remote working, so it doesn't need to be actually sitting beside them, but if you're working with them, if you can help them to try and make them a bit better, then it's easy. But I mean, as I said at the start, I'm working in a company where people have been doing the same or similar things for 25 years. That's really hard to unpick that. And it's really hard because people take it as a personal criticism. You're saying you can do your computer can do my job better than I can. Nah, I don't believe it. It's threatening. It's really hard. Depending on age, you've all got parents or grandparents that think they can outmap Google. Don't Google it. I'll go and I'll tell you. I'll bring out my ordnance survey map. People love what they're used to, and in our personal life, we all know that, and we have examples of that. And then we go into corporate life and we forget. But people are people, and they behave the same way in work and outside work. And it's just about identifying how would you change your parents' opinion on something? How would you change your children, your friends? It's all about influencing skills, and it's all about what's in it for them. Why should they care, right? And I hate to say, a lot of the time in data science, data scientists tend to approach it in talking about this is what I've done, rather than the how. This is why you should care. They talk about this is what I've built, rather than leading with, you've got a problem there, I can make you look like a rock star. All right, I'm interested. And that, it sounds so simple, but honestly, it's just that way of thinking. If you were worried about your job, would you genuinely want to work with a data scientist? The answer is almost certainly not. So make it non-threatening. Find those little nuggets. Start with something really simple. That's what I'm saying, like the 75% accurate model. Go with that, because you've done it in a month. Go with something that we built something in Clydesdale where we tried to predict a customer's balance at the end of the month. And that was the really cool bit. But in getting there, we also took all the transactions and rolled them up into categories. And all the business users went, that categorization tool is amazing. And we're like, no, we literally just robbed that off the internet. We added no value to that. It's just bespoke. It's not even bespoke code. It's just code we found on GitHub. No, but I love that. I really love that. No, but we can predict someone's balance 2 months in the future. Nah, I don't care. I care about the categorization engine. And that's where you sometimes just have to be a bit less precious and go, fine, take my slightly amended code I found on GitHub. Go with that because you love it, and then we can build on it. But it's single-handedly the hardest thing, and it's difficult. It's really hard because people are naturally quite suspicious, and rocking up with people that are as old as their children. Often you're speaking to someone, and I've got a 22-year-old PhD student telling me that they know what they're talking. I don't know if that's technically possible, is it, to be a PhD at 22? But anyway, it's really hard. It's really hard. So that's the only thing I can say is just try and simplify it, try and get in their head, try and work out what would make them look like a rock star. That's generally what I'd advise. Hopefully that helps.
Can you give any tips on how to answer an interview question? Tell us about a time you have changed the accepted way of doing things. Because I'm finding this interview question really hard. I can tell in my last job, my team used Power Queries to process and transform some 80 Excel spreadsheets. And I told them I could write the Python code with the loop to do exactly the same. And I demonstrated how to do it. I have written some detailed instructions with screenshots, but they were still very, reluctant to change how they were doing it. So I wonder how I could answer potentially an interview question about some innovation.
Focus on machine learning, because almost certainly you don't have an example that's machine learning related. So I think Power Query is a good example, right? Where I would just simplify it and say, we talked to someone about the fact that they should consolidate all their data into one database. You need to massively simplify your expectations, because that's really to win someone over in the really complicated stuff is really hard. So, but most people will have an example. My stupid example of making my mum use an app on her phone as opposed to a bit of paper. I think the only thing you can do is you need to, if it's an interview question, you can't lie. You need to have an answer that comes from your own experience. So just really think about your own experience and really simplify what you did, because people are looking for influencing skills. They're not necessarily looking for you to change the world. They're just looking for you to nudge someone along the way a little bit. They're looking for evidence that you can nudge somebody. They're not looking for, I give advice to a CEO and it changed the world overnight, because that stuff doesn't happen. So it's all about, Tim Minchin talks about being micro-ambitious, and I love that. It's like, let's just focus on the tiny, tiny little wins that you would otherwise neglect. And I think if you take some time as you go through, what I recommend to a lot of people is, if you just write down at the end of every day what went well, you'd be surprised how many, if you're forced to write 3 things that went well every day, sometimes you've got to really dig deep, right? Sometimes you've got to go, oh God, I got out of bed, I made it to work on time, because it can be really hard working in this area. But I think if you focus on those little things, there will be micro examples of where you helped to influence somebody and nudge them along the road. Because I can tell you, in 2 years of working at Aberdeen, have I changed the company? No. Have I got some people to use a dashboard who'd never used a dashboard before? Yes. It's not machine learning. Did we, instead of deploying 3 environments in an Azure environment, we deployed a 4th that was a halfway house between production and someone's desktop. That's a win, right? It's nothing to do with machine learning, but it's a win. And that's what I think you should concentrate on, is the tiny, tiny little wins. And if you look at them, you'll find a good example probably. Don't worry about making it machine learning, because if you've got a machine learning example, then amazing, use it, but you might not. Does that help? Hopefully? Yeah, a little bit. Good luck anyway. It's hard, and that's why they asked that question, because it is really hard. Hi.
Hi. So one of the examples you gave reminded me of a sketch from that Emano Iannucci gave in the early 2000s, and that was, not sure if you're aware of it, that was the dinner party and the pie. So that was where he and a few other people were at a dinner party, and there was always that subtle game of one-upmanship in terms of wittiness. But the pie he was given had all of the right things to say in it. So he kept on extracting all of these answers. And I guess that might be a sort of story that's sort of analogous to how you influence people to adopt these technologies. And within that, they don't care about how it works. The pie just works through magic. The technology just works through magic, any sufficiently advanced technology. But the reason you want the pie is both, I'm not sure whether you call it carrot or stick, push or pull factor. You want it because you want to be the person who's not lost for words, who's able to do the thing, but you don't want to be, to look bad in front of all of these other people who are adopting these technologies. So how do you strike the right balance between almost the hope and the fear qualities when you're trying to get people to adopt a technology like that?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the environment you're in. I think in a lot of companies there'll be a bit of fear because there's cost cutting. There's a lot of companies have had a really hard time over the last couple of years. Everyone's always looking at cost. You've always got that fear anyway, kind of hanging over. You're not going to get the same money as everyone else. I think it depends on the individual circumstances. For me, it's more about hope rather than punishment, right? Because generally, if somebody is worried and fearful about losing a job, for example, they just shut down, right? And I've seen it if you say to somebody, you're not going to get funding next year unless you do this, they'll just be like, ah. It's like when you get a bad diagnosis from the doctor, you don't hear that, you hear the word cancer or whatever, you don't hear whatever happens after that. For me, maybe I'm just an idealist. I tend to go on hope and tend to go, right, what can I do to make your life better? And let's focus on that. What can I do? And then I just scale that, right? I'll go and speak to you. What can I do? Right, I can try that, right? Have a think about that. I'll come back to you, right? I'll try this person. I'll try this person. I'll try this person. And literally, it's a schmoozing game. It's a let's go and let's do the numbers. Let's speak to as many people as we can. And it's about trying to have that, almost like that sales pipeline is how I think about it. If you're a salesperson, you've got all these prospects, and then eventually it funnels down into a number of people that will buy your product. That's essentially what we're talking about here. And a lot of data science teams end up going, I'm going to work on one project a year. And you're like, wow, like we've got a project at the moment where the two people in the business are trying to predict currency fluctuation. They've been working on it for a year each. And it's like, see if you make that work. Amazing, you can predict currency fluctuation. It's fine, we'll all be billionaires. Amazing. That's a moonshot though. That's a big thing to aim for. Much easier to aim for something a bit smaller and do loads of them, rather than putting all of your money into one moonshot. It's the same as if you're investing. I can't give investment advice, but it's very rare for someone to say, put all your eggs in one basket. And I think that's the same here. It's scatter your ideas throughout the company and just keep speaking to people and speaking to people and speaking to people. And you'd be surprised. It doesn't happen instantly, but you're surprised how often we just do show and tells all the time. And it's just doing that show and tell, show and tell, show and tell. And then somebody approaches you after the show and tell, goes, that one's not directly, but could you speak to me about this tool? Oh, that'd be really interesting. That's what it is for me, is just hope's probably the way I would focus on. And I hope people will go for it even if there's a bit of a fear behind them. They don't want to be left behind, but stick's hard. Carrot's always easier, I would say, as an optimist.
Yeah. Also, I've got a question from the
Oh.
audience.
Trying to multitask over here. Hopefully I do this justice. I know you mentioned that analysts should be ruthless and move quickly to other stuff when the proof of concepts are not turning to production as expected. But if you're not getting results, what do you do to encourage such analysis? And that's from Idris on the live stream.
So what to do? I think if you're being ruthless and your proof of concepts are quite cheap, no one's going to stop you doing them. If your proof of concepts cost 100 grand a time, you're going to run out of road pretty quickly. But if your proof of concepts are quick and easy, there's no risk for the business to do it. We talk about that all the time. Give me a CSV and I'll give you value within a month. And my guys look at me and go, did you say a month? We can't do that in a month. Yeah, we can. We can put a Power BI over something in a month, and we can do maybe a bit of anomaly detection. We can do something like that in a month. That's easy to do in a month. I'm saying easy, I couldn't do it, but it is easy to do in a month. Let's go and do that. And if you can deliver value in a month, or you find out there's nothing there. We've done projects in Aberdeen where we've tried to look for stuff. We've spent months looking and there's been nothing there, but that's a valid output in itself. We looked to see if we were doing anything wrong in trading land. We found we weren't. We looked to do audits. We found we weren't doing anything wrong in audits. That's a valid outcome, but just done it, we've done it, wash our hands of it, move on to the next thing. The cheaper you can make these things, the faster you can make your proof of concepts, the less pushback you're going to get for doing them. That's the key for me. The other way to do it is you have a cash cow and you do what I call pro bono stuff. So you've maybe got, these ones are paying the mortgage, and I'm going to do these ones in the background because these are quite good fun. And these are the ones that we did some work with vulnerable customers where we were trying to predict people getting into financial distress. And there's no real commercial upside to that, you know. But what there is it's great for our reputation, it's great for the FSA, and most importantly, it's great for customers. We did that as a free piece of work. So we basically said in our spare time, essentially, we're going to go and do that. And we were able to look at, if you tell me these customers are vulnerable now, we can look back 6 months, work out that glide path down to vulnerability, and we can tell you the customers we think are going to be vulnerable in 6 months. There's not really a commercial uptick to that, but it's the sort of thing that somebody would go, well, I'll go and do that. So that you just have to mix it up, and you just have to being ruthless is great, but keeping things as cheap as you can, because you're all employed to do a job, you all need to do work. So it's about finding that balance. But sometimes you do need to do things off the side of the books to say, these are the ones this is the dog food that's paying the mortgage. I'm going to do the exciting stuff, you know, in my own time, half an hour a week, whatever it is. Hopefully that answers the question. Was it Idris, I think, in the interweb? Any other questions? Oh, question there.
Yeah, got a shout here.
Sorry,
A quick question.
I was going to say, Chris, you must have a burning question for me.
Question. Martin may be surprised to know. But you mentioned about building your loft conversion, and you said every day you're going to hire somebody that's done it 100 times over the new architect with loads of new ideas. So I thought we'd probably have some grads in the audience that are coming out of uni, they've got loads of algorithms they're excited about, they've got great new ideas, but how do they showcase to commercial organisations that are outcome driven or that they are commercially savvy? So how are they getting that across so that they've got a chance if they're competing against a commercially experienced data scientist?
So I think all you can do is, similar to the answer I gave Lady earlier on, I think is it's really difficult to do that in data science because you're a grad, you don't have the experience, you don't have the data, but there's loads of free data sets available. You know, so if you go out, there are loads of companies that are publishing free data sets that you can play with. There's loads of dashboarding tools that you can use for free. So there are things you can do that will show in your own time, this is what I've done. One of my old data scientists you know quite well, Chris, he used to go out in his own time and get the Twitter API and go and find out, well, let's go and see, Gavin, sorry, his name is. Gavin would go and get the Twitter API and just find something interesting about from Twitter feeds, be able to track this. There's always things you can do with free data sets that will show how good you are and that show what you can do. And that's not an idea, that's, I got it, I built it, this is the dashboard I built, this is interesting. Or you take it out of data science and you do something just a bit more mundane and say, I built a Power BI dashboard, I built a database, I helped automate somebody's Excel. It's all about showing you've got the nous to do it. You don't necessarily need to have done it for data science. Yeah. You know, it's about showing that you're commercially aware and showing that you understand more than showing you're commercially aware and you understand the data science. That would be the ideal. If you're grad, you don't have that opportunity, but there are loads of great free data sets. Go and play with them. Go and do something with them. Go and see what you can do. Use a Twitter API if you want. Find some fun hashtag-related stuff. That would be my advice. Because I'm not hiring. If you're hiring a grad, you're not expecting them to have experience in that, but you're looking for a little bit of spark, a little bit of show me that you can do stuff. I don't expect people to spend their entire life in it. I want them to have a life as well. But if they can show that they've done something that's a bit interesting, that would appeal to me.
Perfect. And yourself?
It's actually two questions, kind of. So you were saying it's better to have something 75% accurate out in production. So I'm wondering, kind of, how do you figure out what's an acceptable accuracy for getting something out into production? And I guess the follow-up question is then, how do you manage those expectations with who's using it?
So the glib answer is, if it's better than a coin toss, we're at the races, right? But the kind of more serious answer is it better than what they're doing just now? So whatever the business is doing just now, they're using some way of working out how they're going to do what they do for a living. If you've got a model that does that better, it doesn't need to be massively better. It doesn't need to be 20 times better. It just needs to be a little bit better. It just needs to inch you along. I think often in big business, we do this in Aberdeen and in Clydesdale, that you've got a process that I would say is maybe 5 out of 100 in terms of effectiveness. And there's a real, well, if we're going to change it, we need to change it to 95. Well, no, you don't. You just need to get a little bit better. And that would be how, it just needs to be better than what you've got just now. And sorry, I forgot your second question because I was focused on the first one.
Yeah, it was sort of how you then manage that with the people who are using it. But yeah.
I think if you're doing things that make people look better, honestly, how effective the model is much more of a worry for the data scientist than it is for the person using it. Genuinely, I've put some pretty shonky stuff in front of people, especially salespeople, and they've ripped my arm off for it because it makes them look a little bit better. If you make money from selling a product and somebody can make your return 1% better, you'll take that. Literally anything to make me better. As long as I don't need to spend huge amounts of time doing it, and it's back to human behavior again. I think as data scientists, we obsess. I'll count myself as a data scientist, why not? I think we obsess too much about how accurate the model is. And I think in reality, it just needs to be good enough and it just needs to be better than the alternative. You know, so if me plotting my own route back to Waverley Station could take me half an hour and Google Maps gets me 27 minutes, I'll take the 3 minutes, right? There might be a 20-minute route that an Edinburgh local knows, but it's still better than I would have done by myself, so I'm okay with that. You know, and to me, it's all about thinking about human behavior. How would you react if somebody said to you, I'm going to give you something that's a little bit better than what you've got? It's very rare for you to go, no, no, no. Come back to me when it's 20 times better. Thank you very much. It just doesn't happen, right? If you're buying a new phone, you're buying a phone that's slightly better than one you've got. We don't have quantum leaps anymore. And often with the quantum leaps comes real nervousness anyway. So I think the incremental effect is much, much easier to manage because it gives people a comfortable glide path. Because we've all I get sales pitches every day of the week. Every single company tells me they can revolutionize what we're doing, and most of the time it's nonsense, right? But if somebody told me I can make what you're doing 5% better, okay, I'm interested. Let's talk now. Hopefully there's no salespeople listening to this. But it's people go for the quantum leaps. Quantum leaps aren't possible. You know, when we put chat into Sky, we were told that it would reduce our call volume by 30%. We were getting 1 million calls a week. So taking out 300,000 calls, that's really appealing. We never get anywhere near that. So people oversell all the time. I would say just undersell and just say, we'll make your life a little bit better. But it's going to be really cheap and it's going to be really fast. It's too easy to say it's going to take 2 years and make your life twice as good. Or we can say, well, I can make it 5% better in a month. You'll take 5% better in a month, every day of the week. Because I can see that, I can feel that. That would be my recommendation. Honestly, as a community, we worry too much about model accuracy, way too much. Because we see the flaws. We see all the flaws. It's like me standing up in front of you today going, oh my God, my shirt doesn't look ironed. I'm hoping most of you don't care, right? But walking here, I really cared about that. Because that's just the way humans are. You obsess about the things that other people, I'm actually getting a haircut tomorrow. I've been worried about that. I had a dream about it thinking, should really have got my hair cut before I did this. The reality is most people don't care. Maybe half of you are thinking, Jesus, he could have at least done his hair. I don't know, but like people obsess about things that most people just don't care about. And I think we obsess too much about model accuracy and we see all the flaws. Whereas other people literally, salespeople deciding on what product to sell next, who to contact next, sometimes it is literally, that one, I'll phone you and I'll talk to you about something. Again, hopefully not doing salespeople a disservice, but incremental small gains would be what I would say.
Sorry guys, that's all we've got time for, but I think Martin's going to be sticking around outside if you want to grab him for a couple of minutes. Obviously we've got time for networking outside and still get beers and pizzas available, so thank you very much, Martin. Everybody really enjoyed it.
Thank you all for listening as well. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thank you.